Welcome to the tip channel. That is perfection. Hello and welcome back to the tip channel. Eventually we'll get to all these goodies from Kreg behind us in future videos. Today what we're going to talk about is pocket holes. My name's Dawn. I've been in the kitchen industry for 47 years. What can I say? I'm old. What was I talking about? Anyways, none of that matters. I've done every phase of the kitchen industry. I've done measuring, I've done designing, I've done sales, I've done factory write-ups. I've worked in the factory, I've fabricated, and I went out and installed. So the knowledge you're going to gain on these are going to be based on the cabinet industry. Now, this is going to be a very comprehensive video. I would like to put something together where you could come to one location and find everything about pocket holes in the Kreg systems. So we're going to be looking at a lot of different of the Kreg tools, but we're also going to be looking at plugs. We're going to talk about the advantages of pocket holes. We're going to talk about wood. So this can get very long-winded. And some people say, Dawn, you talk a little too much. What we're going to do is to break this down into chapters. If you're getting tired and it's like, hey man, I'll deal with this another day, you can come back and resume to another chapter or naturally just skip right to what you want. Now, I'm not trying to outdo anybody on YouTube. There's a lot of good talent out there. And then naturally, there's Joe Bob out there catching a fish. Anyways, I want you to take a few notes as we go through this because there will be a quiz at the end of each chapter. What? I'm kidding. I'd like to start this chapter by giving you a little bit of a history lesson in regards to pocket holes. Now, they've actually done x-rays of pieces of furniture that date clear back to the Renaissance period. Now, the Renaissance period was the 14th to the 17th century. It was also very highly used in the Hancock Shaker Village in the early 1800s. Also, again, federal furniture that was produced from like 1780 up till about 1820. Again, very widely used. Now, a lot of these beautiful pieces of furniture are still around today. What amazes me is that you have some woodworkers crawling out of the woodwork, doing an inferior setup, using inferior wood, doing an inferior test, and producing an inferior result, and saying that the pocket hole's not strong. It's been around for 600 years. What's to prove? Why is the kitchen industry, so many of the manufacturers, changing to pocket holes? Well, let's take a little bit of a look at the history of joinery and what it takes to actually make those type of joints. Now, first of all, a mortise and tenon joint. Now, a mortise and tenon joint, basically what you have is you have a mortise, which is the hole that is done into the style, and then you have a tenon. Now, the mortise you could have a fancy machine to make, but basically you could also do it with a drill press. This isn't about doing mortise and tenon joints, so I'm not going to get too deep. But it would be a drill bit, something like this one here, and then the tenon you would do on a table saw. Now, mortise and tenon joint, fantastic, very, very strong. If this were about making rocking chairs, this would be my go-to joint. But we're not making rocking chairs, we're making cabinets. The second joint is a loose tenon. Now, with a loose tenon, it's basically the same as a mortise and tenon, with the exception that you're doing a mortise in both the stile and rail, and then you're inserting a wood tenon in the two mortised holes. The next joint is using dowels. Now, you have a machine which very precisely drills two holes in both your stile and your rail. Then you take a dowel pin, you shoot glue down into the hole, insert the dowel pin into both directions. Another joint, the biscuit joint. Now, use a biscuit joiner and you use biscuits. Another joint is a corrugated fastener. Now you can actually get corrugated fasteners that you can actually take and drive in with a hammer. What? I don't have the fancy ring on my hammer. Anyways, also you can get the corrugated fasteners which actually are shot by a gun. Corrugated fasteners, very easy to split the wood and what have you. It does make a fairly strong joint, but not something I would actually use a whole lot. Now the date on this particular gun looks like somebody put 11/10/08, so that gun's been around a while. Now the few joints I've mentioned so far basically have been used for face frames of cabinets. And I'm going to stop right here. Other than the corrugated fastener, what do all these joints have in common? First of all, they all need to be glued and they all need to be clamped. Now, don't get me wrong, a man can have too many clamps. If you're limited on your clamps and what have you, the average wood glue, you're talking 25-30 minutes to set up. So there you are, you have to go work on something else while you're waiting on this part to set up. So far, the joints that we've covered is only really about the face frames of the cabinets. Now, what about the rest of the cabinet? The drawer boxes, the cabinet carcasses. There are dovetail joints, there are butt joints, there are mitered butt joints, there is dovetail joints, there is French dovetail joints. The list goes on and 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 on. But what if I told you that you could build a good, strong cabinet with a table saw and a pocket hole jig? Stick along later on in some of the later videos, and we're going to show you all the tricks and techniques to do just that. The systems that we're going to be taking a look at was actually started by a gentleman named Craig Summerfield in 1989. Now, all of the Kreg setups are going to be based by the thickness of material. Now, whenever you go to the lumber yard and you purchase a 1x4, now you would expect that a 1x4 would be 1 inch thick and 4 inches wide, and it's not. The 1x4 dimension is what's referred to as a nominal dimension. This board will actually measure 3/4 of an inch by 3.5 inches wide. When you buy a 2x4, a 2x4 will actually measure 1.5 inches thick by 3.5 inches wide. So nominal measurements. Now, just the opposite is true. If you go to a place that kiln dries lumber, they're buying the lumber from the sawmill, they're bringing it to the kiln to dry it, to prepare it, to make something out of. Now, that particular wood will be referred to as rough cut lumber. And it will be available in what's referred to as 4/4, 6/4, and 8/4. Now, what's 4/4? $1? No. 4/4 is 1 inch, 6/4 is 1.5 inches, and 8/4 is 2 inches. Now, these will be actual dimensions because the material is going to be rough and you need to plane it. Now, I know that sounds confusing, and you can see a little bit more of that if in my video preparing rough cut lumber to finish trim. But Kreg has simplified that. You don't have to know how to read a rule. 3 of the dimensions that you're commonly going to use to build cabinets and what have you is going to be 1/2 inch, 3/4, and 1.5 inches. So most of the jigs nowadays come with this handy little device. All you simply do is you take it, put it on the device, and it tells you what the thickness of material is. Now, to create a Kreg pocket hole, what you're going to do is you're going to use a Kreg drill bit. Now, this drill bit has what's referred to as a stop collar, and this is the piece that you will adjust for different thicknesses of material. It's going to have a counter bore, and it's going to have a pallet point. Now, what does the drill bit do? The drill bit creates the pocket that you're seeing here, and a good pocket hole should not exit the material. A good pocket hole will actually stop short of coming completely through. What you'll see is that the pallet point will be about 1/8 of an inch from the end of the workpiece that you're working on. It's going to create the counter bore for the pocket of the screw. It's going to create this flat ledge. Now the flat ledge is for the pan head of the screw. And then it has what's referred to as a pilot point hole. And what the pilot point hole is that it directs the screw right to the dead center of the piece of material that you're working on, so that if the piece that you're going to screw it to is the same thickness, it's going to enter that piece dead center of the material. And it's going to do that at a 15-degree angle. And that's what the Kreg jigs are set up for. Now, if you're working with 3/4 materials and you're looking at a standard jig, the shank of this will actually measure about 3/8 of an inch, and the pilot point is a little over 1/8. Now, the pilot directs the screw, but it also does one more thing, is that the Kreg screws are manufactured with a smooth shank. So whenever the two pieces come together, the smooth shank basically is able to spin inside of the pilot point area and draw the two pieces together. So that's why when you're making a Kreg pocket, you want to use the Kreg screws. Okay, let's talk a few minutes about the Kreg screws and the differences in them. Now, 95% of the time, you're going to be using a screw that has what's referred to as a pan head. Now, the pan head seats very nicely at the bottom of the ledge on the pocket hole. So it gives it a nice little landing area, if you will, so you can draw those two pieces nice and tight together. Now, you're also going to find some heads that I think they refer to as a maxi lock, and they're a very small head which you're using in thinner materials. You're also going to find what's referred to as a trim head, which you would use in something where you're trying to conceal that screw as much as possible. As far as the materials, your normal Kreg screw is going to be a zinc-coated screw. Now, furniture, kitchens, bathroom, cabinetry, any of that's going to be fine with the zinc-coated screw. If you're going to an exterior application, something like a deck or what have you, you may want to take a look at the blue coat screw. And then if, say for instance, you're doing a shower or you're building a boat dock, there is actually a stainless material as well. And the new XL is made for putting together 2x4s, 4x4s. They're made for an exterior applications, and they have 3 layers of corrosion resistant material on the screw itself. So in choosing the screw, you just need to know where you're going to be using the screw at. Now, as you become thicker and thicker with materials, you're going to increase the screw length. Now, here's a handy little chart that came with one of my Kreg setups. Now, some of the later setups change a little bit, so you might want to take a look at the owner's manual that comes with you in order to choose the screw you're going to use. In regards to the threads that are available from Kreg, there's basically only 2 types. There's the coarse thread and then there's the fine thread. Now the coarse thread is going to be fine for any of your softwoods like pine, fir, things like that. The fine thread you're going to switch to whenever you're working with hardwoods. And the fine thread is a lot less likely to split the hardwood than what the coarse thread does because it's a little less aggressive. Now, if you take a close look at the tip on a Kreg screw, what you're going to find is what's referred to as a self-tapping tip. What that does is actually drill itself right down into your secondary workpiece. Now, in driving these screws into the workpiece, you're going to use about a 6-inch long Kreg square bit driver. That goes very nicely down into the pocket so you're not fighting the drill against your workpiece. For your typical screws, you're going to use a number 2 bit driver, and the new XL, you're going to use a number 3. Let's talk about hardwood and putting pocket holes in hardwood. Now, first of all, plywood. Plywood basically, as it is made, it has different layers or different cores, if you will. Now, what they do is they take and they put one core this way, one core this way, so forth and so on throughout the entire sheet. So, pocket holes, you can do any size that you want to in regards to plywood. It's not an issue. Also, industrial board with a melamine covering, which industrial board basically is the best grade of particle board. Again, pocket holes anywhere that you want. The only real difference I do on plywood versus the particle board, I'll start my holes about 2 inches in on the particle board because I don't want to get any blowout. Now, hardwood, on the other hand, is a totally different ballgame. Now, what you're looking at with hardwood is that, first of all, you can't go to the lumberyard and buy something and build something out of it. It's way too wet. You can't go cut down a tree and build something out of it. Again, it's way too wet. You need to get your hardwoods from a place that has kilns, and they kiln dry the wood. Now, an ideal moisture content in the wood is somewhere between 5 and 10%. Now, how you can tell that, they have moisture meters, and they're relatively very inexpensive. And basically, you probe the wood, and that moisture meter will tell you what the moisture content is in that piece of wood. So the last thing that you want to do is to build something out of something that is still wet above that 10% moisture content. Here's the reason being, is that once that wood starts to dry out, it's going to warp, it's going to split, it's going to twist, it's going to be very, very unstable. And I cover a lot more of this in a video of mine called Preparing Hardwood Rough Cut Lumber into Molding, something like that. Anyways, the situation with wood is that as the relative humidity in a room increases and decreases, wood expands and contracts. So, here's the problem dealing with hardwoods is that what you will get is that you will get a lot of expansion in a very wide board in the width, not so much in the height, but in the width. So when you're making face frames and what have you for cabinets, it's not really an issue because naturally you're talking narrow widths for stiles and rails. However, if you start to make some things out of real hardwood, and you want to be able to screw it. Now, you can get away pretty much with screwing along this edge because, as I mentioned, it's not going to expand and contract as much as it will the other way. Now, once you get above 6 inches in width, this is a side that you do not want to put pocket holes on because you don't want to trap that expansion and contraction. If you do, out in the field, this is going to crack. So, in a real hardwood door, how do they prevent that? Well, this hardwood door, first of all, naturally, as you can see, has stiles and rails around it. And that keeps the center panel from warping. But what you can't see is down inside of this groove is little rubber space balls. And those little rubber base balls take up for that expanding and contract. In regards to hardwoods making your face frame of your cabinet, you have to understand a little bit about the wood itself. What you're looking at is face grain is on the face and it's on the back. And also the two long edges also have face grain. Now the end of this is what's referred to as end grain. Now the thing that you don't want to do is to make a joint where you're actually screwing into end grain. So in other words, if you were to do a pocket screw like that, that would be very, very weak. Screws going into end grain don't hold very well. The type of joint that you're looking for is that you're wanting to go into the face grain. So that having been said, that is a perfect joint. You can also go like this. That's a perfect joint. Because you're going into the face grain, you're going to get a very strong joint. Okay, time for some meat and potatoes. Speaking of which, it's about lunchtime. Has it got back with my lunch? What? He ate my fries? Kids. Whoops, sorry. Anyways, 300 series. 300 series, there's basically 4 versions currently of the 300 series. You first of all have a 310. 310 is a single drilling unit. You have a 320, which has 2 drilling units and a spacer in between and is expandable. Now, these 2 jigs are made for 1/2 inch, 3/4, and 1.5 inch material. You'll also have a version of this called a micro. Now, the micro was made for 1/2 inch materials, especially if you're working with 1/2 inch hardwoods. It will drill a 33% smaller hole in the unit. And then you have an XL model. Now, the new XL is primarily made for screwing 2x4s together. And believe it or not, 4x4s. Now, how many times have you tried to put 2 4x4s together without doing like a half lap or something like that? The new XL is your answer. You now can do 4x4 systems. Anyways, all 4 of the systems setups are the same. As I mentioned in the previous video, everything about the Kreg system is always set up based on thickness of material. So basically what you're going to find is at the bottom of the units, you're going to find a little gray plastic clip. Now, when you push in on this clip, you can move it. So you push in and you move it. Now, you will notice as you're adjusting the gray tabs on the back side that there are little indentations in the track. So what you want to see is that you want to move that until this pops up right into that indication. And you can see the tab is up. Now you know it's securely locked into place. For our demonstration, we're going to be talking about 3/4 inch thick material. So I have it set at 3/4, and you can tell it's in the right position because you can see it through the window. Then you take your drill bit and you're going to loosen the collar with a handy little jig that they gave you for the thickness of material. And you're going to look right through the window, adjust it till it falls right in the 3/4 mark, and tighten it up. Now, the little jig as well, as in the first video, that's going to tell you what your thickness of material is. So we now have the jig set up, 3/4 inch material. We have the drill bit set up for 3/4 inch material. And as I mentioned, these gray adjustable pieces on the bottom is what you're going to want to put against your workpiece. Now, this does have an anti-slip material on the bottom of it, but you still want to clamp it. So tabs against your workpiece, and you're ready to clamp. Now, you can use a Kreg clamp if you want, or any quick clamp. You can clamp just the jig to the material, or you can clamp it right down to the table, whichever you prefer. Now, when you put your clamp into place, what you don't want to do is you don't want to block these exit holes, because naturally that's where your drillings are coming up through, and you don't want to stop that and clog up the process. So next up, you take your drill, you insert it into the drill guide, and take it down until you can feel it touch the wood. Then you want to pull it back some. You don't want to start right against the wood, and you go ahead and do your drill. Now let's dive a little deeper into the jig itself. And what I'm talking about is if you leave it in this position so that you have your 2 drilling holes and your spacer in between, and you're working with, say for instance, a piece of 3-inch material, that's going to work very, very nicely on the 3-inch material. As you can see, spacing's about perfect. But what if you're doing stiles and rails, and those stiles and rails are only 1.5 inches wide? Well, basically that is what is nice about the unit, is that it is expandable. Now what I mean by that is you take the one piece, pull it back and turn it, remove it. Do the same with the center spacing, pull back, turn it, and remove it. Then you take the 2 pieces and you put them back together again. Slide up, now you're ready for 1.5 inch material. Expandable. So you could take another unit, put it together, and have 3 holes. Or you could go on and on and on, up to maybe 60 holes. Has anybody ever done that? Now the 320 does come with this nice little clamping device that works with the Kreg clamp. The way that this works is you take your Kreg clamp, put it in, and adjust it down, and then you put it into the hole on the jig. Now you want to come back here because you don't want to block these holes. So you put it into that position, little rubber spacer goes in down into place, and now the nice thing about this is not now a one-hand operation. So you can take it right over to your workpiece, clamp it down, and you are ready to drill. Now, another nice feature about the 300 series. Let's just say, for instance, you have a piece of furniture that you need to repair, or perhaps if you're like me, I am getting older, you go to assemble something, you say, oh crap, man, I forgot to put a pocket hole in there. Now what do I do? Well, the 300 series makes that very easy. If you take and measure, now this is set for 3/4 material. If you measure from the stop to the end of this, you'll see that it measures 4 5/8. Now, after you have that dimension, you just simply take your jig, pull it apart, okay? Now, you take this, you put a pencil mark 4 5/8 of an inch back from your secondary workpiece. You take this piece, align the front of it on that 4 5/8 dimension, and now you're ready to drill that pocket hole. This concludes the setup of the 300 series jig. If you'd like to see actually assembly using the pocket holes, we will be covering that in another chapter. Next up, the K-4. Now, Kreg is now referring to this as the original K-4, but this is a time-tested, proven piece of equipment that is loved by do-it-yourselfers and professionals. So I think a better name would be the classic K-4. What's a classic? Well, if you're an automobile, you're looking at 25 to 30 years old. So if a classic in automobile is 25 to 30 years old, what's a double classic? What? Old. Don't forget who signs the paychecks around here. I get to tell the jokes. Okay, let's talk about the classic K-4. Actually, the K-4 was my first pocket hole jig. It's where I fell in love with doing pocket holes in cabinetry. I've had this one for probably in the neighborhood of about 12 to 15 years, and I've literally done thousands and thousands of holes in this. And I still use it today. I'll take it out of the drawer, blow the dust off of it, and use it whenever I need to. Now, the K-4 I bought as a master kit, and it came with this piece that made it portable, this little drilling jig, a little stop, and a little dooflicky. Not sure what that was. Anyways, I understand those items are discontinued, so we're not even going to address those. I never used them anyways. But I understand that there was a micro piece for this, which does 33% smaller holes. And if anybody knows where I can get my hands on that, that is something I would like to have. Anyways, if you watch my earlier videos, you know that the Kreg system is based on thicknesses of material. The K-4 will do anywhere from 1/2 inch thick materials up to 1.5 inch thick materials. And it is adjustable by 1/8 inch increments. Now, how you adjust the K-4 is you have a little thumb screw on the back, and you loosen up the thumb screw and you move this block up and down. Now, this has a scale right on the side of it that's made in 1/8 inch increments. So we know we're going to do 3/4 inch material. I'll slip right down to 3/4 and let that thumb screw go right into that hole. The next thing that you need to do is to adjust the drill bit. So you loosen up the collar, put it down into the jig, and what you're going to do is that you're going to line up the step portion of the bit with the thickness of material that you're doing. Make sure your collar is tight against the jig, and you simply tighten the Allen screw. So at this point, your jig is set up, your drill bit is set up. The last thing you have to do is to adjust the stop. So you take your material, you put it in, And I can see that's a little loose, so I'll take and back this out a few turns. So I get a nice amount of pressure. And if I'm going to do multiple pieces, I'll also go ahead and spin that little nut up tight, and then I don't have to worry about it backing off. But at this point, you're ready to start drilling your pocket holes. At this point, we have the jig set up for 3/4 material based by the gauge. We have our drill bit set up. We have our stop with a nice amount of pressure against the piece of wood. We have it lined up with the holes that we want to drill. So at this point, you're ready to actually drill. So you take your drill, insert it into the drill guide, and go down until you can feel it actually touching the wood. Now, you don't want to start out there. You want to pull back just a little, spin the drill up, and go ahead and drill your hole. Now, when you're drilling hardwood, you may need to take several up and down passes in order to clear the wood shavings out of your way. Now, you want to drill to the point that your stop collar comes down against your Kreg jig. At that point, you're deep enough. Now, other features of the Kreg jig. If you don't want to make a mess like I just did, there is a dust collection system. It just simply pops right into place, and you can hook up an 1.25" vacuum to this, and it takes care of the sawdust. The other features of the K4 is that you'll notice that the back of the unit has this little offset in the back, and this is an area where you can bring it over to your table, and you can take a Kreg clamp or a quick clamp and go ahead and clamp it down to your table. Also on the Kreg, if you want to grab yourself a piece of plywood and take and screw it down to the piece of plywood, there are 4 mounting holes on the jig itself. Now, the thickness of the deck is 1 inch, so if you're going to do that piece of plywood, you might want to make yourself a couple of outriggers 1 inch thick just to support larger pieces. Now, I've never clamped it down, I've never screwed it down, I just have used it as a portable device. Now, when you're working with taller pieces of material, you may find it a little cumbersome to actually reach over and clamp the Kreg jig. Now, I'm 6'1", or at least I used to be. They say you get shorter as you get older. But you can also take the Kreg jig, lay your material down, take your Kreg jig, clamp it onto the material, and then drill your holes. And you're not fighting that reach. That concludes our setup of the classic K4. Okay, the original K4. I still think classic is better. Anyways, if you'd like to see us actually assembling cabinets using the pocket hole system, we will have that available in later chapters. Next up, we're going to take a look at the K5. Now, the K5 is actually a discontinued unit, but there might be a person out there that has this stowed away in their drawer and they pull it back out and say, how did this thing work again? Or they might have bought it on eBay, or you might buy it on Facebook, or you might have bought an open box from a discount place. Okay, yeah, that was me. Anyways, let me tell you a little story. This was actually missing the drilling block whenever I got it. So I sent an email to Kreg, and within 1 hour, I had a response. They said, we can ship that part out to you. And I had that part in my hand in 3 days. Now, you know what I find amazing? Isn't it amazing that if you call someplace for support, you always get that recorded message, and a recorded message says, press 1 for English, press 2 for Spanish, press 3 for Italian, press 4 for Hungarian. So you press the English button, and who do you get? You get some girl from Singapore you can't even understand. Blows my mind. Anyways, enough of that. Let's talk about product. Okay, let's go ahead and cover the setup of the K5. Now, the drill block looks very similar to that of the K4, or the classic K4. Anyways, they did make one improvement. Instead of the little thumb screw, it looks as though they have came up with this little pull-out. You can pull it out and then naturally adjust your block. Now, what you're looking for is There'll be dimensions here on the side, and we know we're going to do 3/4 inch material, so we'll slip right down to 3/4, let that pin go right back into place. Now you'll notice that right underneath of that is a dust collection port, which you can swivel just about in any direction, and if it gets in your way, you can just pop it right off as well. Next up is the clamping device. Now, what you do is, first of all, you want to put your handle all the way down, number one, pull this all the way back, and then you put your piece in, and you slide this up. Now, I couldn't figure out at first why mine wasn't working correctly, and what you need to do is you need to apply a little more pressure against the back of this while you lift up on the handle. As you lift up on the handle, you're going to hear 2 audible clicks. And there we are. We've got our 2 clicks. It's now ready to clamp the piece. So you just push back down on the handle, and as you can see, that work piece is clamped very nicely. Now, once you've set it up for 3/4 inch material, you don't need to keep doing this. Just lift up on the handle, put your next piece in, go on and on and on. If you want to change to a different thickness of material when you want to reset this, you just simply press down on this gray portion and push the unit back. Now, you want to do 1.5 inch material, 1/2 inch material, anything you want to do, you just rinse and repeat the setup. Now, also one more feature is that this has a grip max on the edge of it, and that holds very nicely and doesn't mar your work surface. So that's very nice as well. What you also notice is the 2 outriggers. And the 2 outriggers not only support your work pieces, they also include storage. Now, as I mentioned, I bought this from an open box, and it does come with a real nice guide in regards to the length of screws. You would have thought someone would have put it on the underside, but hey, get what you pay for. Now, the next part of the setup is to set the drill. Now, we've already got the drilling area set at 3/4, and we look at our chart, and we can see that 3/4 inch thick material, we want 1.25 inch screw. So they give you this setup block, which we'll look at the area which says 1.25 inch, and we'll set this into the machine. And then we'll take our drill bit, put it down, and go right into that hole, which is 1.25 inch. And at this point, we set our stop collar. Now, you'll notice that there are 3 drill guides on the K-5. They're labeled A, B, and C. Now, if you're doing 1 inch to 2 inch material, you're going to use B and C. If you're going from 2 to 3 inch material, then you're going to use A and B. And if you're doing 2 to 3 inch material, then you're going to use A and C. Next up, the Kreg 520. Now, one thing they did with this, they made it very lightweight. Not a very big footprint. This is something you can throw on your truck. If you need to do a pocket hole out in the field, you can do. Now, the new thing that they did was that they added this pistol grip. Now, the pistol grip controls the clamping device, which has the drill block in it. Now, you can use it right-handed. You can use it left-handed. This rotates 360 degrees, so no matter where you want to do it, whatever's convenient, you can. Say, for instance, you might be down in a crawl space, and you could have your helper hold this up, and then you could operate it with your foot. Okay, well, maybe not. Setup of the 520 is fairly simple. And just like all the rest of the Kreg system, it's based on thickness of material. Now, this particular unit will come with this handy little device which you can lay right on top of your material and automatically know what the thickness of that material is. It will do anywhere from 1.5 inch to 1/2 inch material, anything in between. What we're going to set up for is 3/4 inch thick material. So, first thing is the drill guide. We want to set it. Now, you'll see that there's 2 little gray tabs, one on each side. You simply push in on those, and then you take your drill guide and you move it up and down accordingly for whatever thickness of material that we're using. Right on the front of this is 1/2 inch, 3/4, and 1.5 inch. We know we're going to do 3/4 stock material, so we're going to move it right down to the 3/4 inch. Next up, we need to set our drill bit. Now, the drill bit is etched with 1/2 inch, 3/4, and 1.5 inches. So what you want to do, you take the handy little tool, it also has a little Allen wrench on the end of it, and you loosen up your stop collar. Now, you want to go ahead and take and line that up perfectly, looking through the window and lining up that 3/4. Take your Allen wrench and tighten up your stop collar. So at this point, this is set up, this is set up. Last thing that we need to do is to clamp our material into place, and that we put our material in, squeeze the trigger until we're nice and tight. Now, if you're going to be doing multiple pieces of 3/4 inch material and you don't want to have to squeeze the pistol grip that many times between setups, they have a nice little locking knob on top. You just simply lock that up, and then whenever you hit the release trigger, instead of coming all the way back, you'll notice it came back just enough for me to pull that out. I can put the next piece right back in, and a pump and a half in, I'm ready to go for my next drilling. Now, with everything set up, we are now ready to drill our pocket holes. So, take your drill, and you want to go ahead and insert it into the drill guide, and go on down until you can feel it actually touch the wood. Now, you don't want to start there. You want to pull back just a little bit, and then start your drill, then do your drilling. If you're doing hardwood, you may need to go up and down a couple of times in order to clear out the wood shavings. Now, other features of the 520 is that if you want to clamp this down, they give you this clamp, you slip this right into the back of it, and you're ready to clamp it down to the table. Also, there is a docking station available for the 520. Now, I don't have the docking station, but the way that it works is that you take your 520 and you click it into the docking station. If you need it portable again, you simply take it back out. Docking station will have storage spaces in it as well. So it is a nice little piece that you can pick up as an accessory to this piece. Also, if you're not going to use the docking station and you're going to be working with some longer pieces and you're worried about being able to stabilize it for that, grab yourself a couple pieces of 3/4 material. That's what your deck is. Put those as outriggers underneath of your piece and you're good to go. Now, the 520 is 3/4 this direction, and it's also 3/4 this direction. So if you're working with a large panel and you find it very cumbersome to work the panel in this direction, naturally you can lay the panel down and do it in this direction. So, very versatile machine. This will complete the setup of the 520. Now, if you'd actually like to see us drilling, making pocket holes, making pieces for cabinetry, we will be covering that in a later video. Next up is a 720 and 720 Pro. Now, this video is being shot in September of 2024. Whether Kreg will come out with anything newer after this, hard to say. But I can say this, they don't need to. What do the kids say? This thing is over the top, man. Anyways, an amazing piece of engineering. First of all, on this part of this jig, you're going to find your drill bit, your material thickness, and your screw gun bit all in one nice location. You know exactly where everything is. So it's going to come with this material gauge, and basically what you do is you simply put it on your material. You automatically know what the thickness of material is going to be. On the two ends of that, you're going to find an Allen wrench, and that Allen wrench is to set your stop collar on your drill bit. Now, one of the nice new inventions that the 720 did is it eliminated setting up the drill guide. And what I'm talking about, this is built on an incline, just like the incline in Pittsburgh. You're not from Pittsburgh? Never mind. Anyways, basically what happens is that as you press down on the lever, as you can see, the drill guide is going on an incline. So it automatically adjusts for the thickness of material. So if you have 1/2 inch thick material, you put it in and you clamp it, done. Pull on the lever, it releases. Go to 3/4 material, not a problem. Lock it down, you're good to go. 1.5 inches, again. Whoops, that might be a problem if you drop it, but clamp it down, good to go. So, no longer any setup on the drill guide. I mean, how nice is that? Especially if you're doing a lot of different dimensional pieces, it automatically adjusts. Now, your drill bit. Drill bit basically is set up pretty easily. You're going to find etched on the drill bit 1/2 inch, 3/4, and 1.5 inches. So what you do is you take your material thickness gauge, you loosen up the collar, line up the window, and clamp it down. Now, I know you're saying, well, gee, Dawn, what if I have a piece of material that's 1 inch or 1 3/8 or yada, yada, yada? They took care of that too. You take this, put the pilot portion of the point of the drill bit down into that hole, snap that into place, loosen up your collar, and if, say, for instance, you're looking at 1 3/8, just set your bottom of your collar there, tighten it up, good to go. How much easier can it possibly get than this new 720? Now, 720 you can use in this position, you can use it in this position. So very, very easy. If you don't buy the expandable 720 Pro, and I don't know why you wouldn't, but anyways, this has 2 little wings. So if you're using it by yourself, you can put these wings out, and now all of a sudden you have supports for a longer piece. Or if you feel more comfortable naturally, you can position the jig in this direction, clamp it down, and you're good to go there. So either direction, you're fine with a 720. With a 720, basically we didn't have to set up the drill guide. All we had to do was set up the drill bit. We don't have to adjust clamping pressure, although there is a knob on the 720. If you want a little more, you want a little less, you can adjust it, but there's no need to. You got an anti-grip surface here that holds it nice and it does not mar your surfaces. So we want to do 3/4 inch material. We got the drill bit set to 3/4. We clamp it. You want to go ahead and insert your drill bit down to the drill guide and take it down till it touches the wood. Now, you don't want to start there. You want to pull back just a little bit, fire up your drill, and do your drilling. On the 720, you're going to notice 3 offset holes. Now, what those are, if you're doing 1.5 to 2 inch material, you're going to use the 2 outside holes. If you're going to use 2 to 3 inch material, you're going to use the 2 holes on the left hand side. If you're doing 2 to 3 inch materials, you're going to use the 2 outside holes. So setup is very good. And you'll notice that what they also put on this is they put little dots. How cool is that? That's actually the center of these 2 holes. So if you put a little line on your thing in the center of it, you can line it right up with that little dot and it's going to drill dead center of that piece of material. Now, with the Kreg system, that's not necessary, but then there'll be 2 more dots, and naturally that's for wider and wider pieces, and that's the center of those work pieces. So, pretty simplistic. What else could they have added to this? Well, now we have the 720 Pro. 720 Pro is going to come with these 2 outriggers. 720 Pro is a nice upgrade. You take these pieces that come with the 720 Pro, they will go right onto your base, and there's a little slot down there. So these will go right down into that little slot. Now that's ready now to attach that to this piece, and you take this and pop it right on. Outriggers attached. You want to take it out to the job site, easy enough to remove if you don't want to leave this on. But I'm going to show you something else. Okay, the other nice feature about the 720 Pro, you're done with it. Now it's taking up so much space on your shelf. No, it doesn't. Simply reach these right up. It says a little turn key on. Turn those right into there. And now you can take this and put it right on your shelf. How small of a footprint is that? Now, the outriggers, very nice. They have storage compartments inside. So with your storage compartments inside, you can keep all of your little devices, screws, yada, 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 all in one place. Now, the 720 Pro also comes with a material stop. And basically what you do is this will snap right into the piece that makes the stop. You put this right on your outriggers, slide it to the position that you want, and tighten it down. Now you can repeat, pocket holes in the same exact location. But let's just say, for instance, we're doing 2-inch stock inside of here, and we want to come a little closer. Well, not a problem. There's 2 more slots. You just simply pop it into one of those slots. Again, put it onto your outrigger, adjust it in, and now it's in far enough to reach your 2-inch stock. And this will work on either side. So what else comes with the 720 Pro? Dust collection. All you do is you take the gray piece, you slide it into either side of the jig, and hook up your vacuum. You got a big shop vac, it comes with an adapter, so you hook it right up. Now, what could they have possibly done to make this tool any better? You thought they'd stop there, right? No. Actually, they have a micro jig that snaps right into the place of the normal jig that's on the 720. They also have another micro jig and plug cutter that can be popped right in. This concludes our setup of the 720. Now, if you'd like to actually see us make product using pocket holes, stick around to the latter chapters, and we're going to show you just that. Next up, the Forman, or as Tim the Toolman would say, what, you never heard of Tim the Toolman? Home Improvement, Tim Allen. He had an assistant, Pamela Anderson. Oh, sure, you remember that. He had a male assistant, Al Gorland. He's doing flooring commercials now. You kids. That's the problem with kids. You guys got no heroes. Anyways, if you're like me, you can't wait to unbox a new piece of equipment and give it a try out. So you get it all unboxed and you set the instructions to the side. You think, I can figure this thing out. Well, the Forman's going to come with this handle packed in the downward position. There's a little switch right on the back of here. You need to lift up on that, and that will actually release your handle. So I just saved you 10 minutes. The setup of the Forman, it is the same as most of the Kreg jigs. It is based on the thickness of material. Now, the Forman will do 1/2-inch thick material, 3/4-inch thick material, clear up to 1.5-inch thick material. So in regards to the setup of the Forman, you're going to have 3 things that you're going to need to adjust. First of all is the fence. Now it has these 2 black lockdowns. You loosen those up and this fence moves back and forth. Now, you do not want to go by the front of the fence. You want to go by the rear of the fence. In our case, we want to go ahead and do a setup for 3/4 inch. So I'm going to bring that down to the line of 3/4 and go ahead and tighten it up. Now, the second thing that we need to do is we need to look at our chart and figure out what size screw we're going to be using. Now, with 3/4-inch thick material, we know that we're going to be using an 1.25 inch screw. So this area of this piece right here is marked for the length of the screw. The way that this works is you set this up next to your fence, and you're going to bring the drill bit out of its hole. And so we're going to bring this up, and we're going to go right into that hole that we have there. Now you take this piece right here and screwing the unit in pulls the drill bit back. Unscrewing it, or leftly loosey, you come closer to the fence. So we're going to bring it right up until that touches the fence, and we're going to go ahead and lock that little piece down right underneath of it. So now our drill bit is set. Next thing that we do is to adjust for the thickness of the material. Now, what we're after here is we're going to go ahead and screw this down until it touches the 3/4. Now, that's too tight. We don't want that. So we're going to back it up just a little, and we want to get it to the point where that 3/4 just fits nicely underneath of it. And at that point, we're going to go ahead and tighten the lock nut. Because here's what's going to happen. Whenever you pull down on this, see this action? That's actually clamping that piece down tight to the fence. So we want it loose enough where we quickly can change pieces, but as we pull down, that piece is going to be locked into place. So we've done our 3 adjustments. We've adjusted for the fence, we've adjusted for the drill depth, and we've adjusted for the pressure on our piece. So at this point, you're actually ready to drill a hole. Now, the other things that I want to point out to you is that, first of all, the fence is marked in both imperial and metric dimensions. And also what is on the fence is these little stops. Now, as you can see right now, that stop is in an in position, but if you want to use it, all you simply do is push towards the center and it pops right out. So at this point, that's a nice stop for your material so that you can continuously do pocket holes in the same location. Now, you can adjust this with the Allen wrench that you're seeing on the side. And if you're doing multiple pieces, you might be doing one like this and then doing one like this, what have you. You can actually leave this piece sticking out because, as you can see, it's spring-loaded, and whenever I press in on it, it just goes right back into the fence area. Now, if you want to get rid of it, you push in and pull it outwards, and it locks inside of the fence. So, nice feature as well. Now, the other thing about the Kreg is that, let's just say, for instance, that you want to access the drill to change the drill bit. So, basically, they've made this top, and by the way, this is a cast aluminum, and it's got a polymer base on it, and you can lift this up with ease. I'm talking under 20 pounds. But anyways, this top lifts up, and there's a little device right underneath that is a lid support and holds that up for you. Now, you'll notice underneath of that, you're going to find a nice storage tray. But to access your motor, access your drill bit, there's a little pin right here. You pull that pin out. That releases the motor from the arm. Arm will drop down out of place, and then you simply pull the motor out and you're ready to change the bit. This has a quick coupling, just like an impact drill. So basically you pull out on it, pull your bit out, and you're ready to slip another one right back in again. Now, keep in mind as you do this, you want to make sure the unit's unplugged. To go back in, you simply slide it back in and connect the arm back up again. So very, very easy to do. When you're finished, lower the lid support inside and shut the lid. Now, it is possible to adjust your top. There's little Allen screws underneath of that, and you can find that in your owner's manual. Mine comes shipped perfectly, so I'm not going to cover that. Now, another thing about the Kreg is the trigger. Now, it has a safety over here at the end, so you got to push in on the safety, push the trigger, and then you're ready to actually drill a hole. So, safety, trigger. The other nice thing about this, if you look very closely, there's a hole in this trigger. Now, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the young ones, but you'll see a 4-year-old with a phone, and just amazes me what they're able to do nowadays. So this is something a child's going to want to play with. We don't want to see that happen. This is an area where you can put a little padlock. Nothing on this will function. So even if you leave it unplugged on the shelf, as I mentioned, this is only 20 pounds, so a young one's going to pick it up, bring it over, plug it in, and want to play with it. So if you have a young one around, put a padlock in. The other thing that the Kreg Forman has is dust collection. And this is very nice. If you're going to use the dust collection, this comes with a hose. You hook the hose up underneath and it goes to this port, and then you simply hook up your vacuum. Now, if you're not using dust collection, don't hook up the hose, because that hose will fill up with a bunch of wood chips and then naturally clog your machine up. Now, the Forman by itself is an amazing piece of equipment, but if you want to take it up to the next level, the drill guide that you're seeing here and the drill bit are available in the new Micro. Now, the Micro actually drills a 33% smaller hole. So if you're working with thinner materials like 1/2 inch, you might want to check out the Micro because it works really nice with thinner materials. And then you will also see a drill guide and drill bit for their HD series. Now, the HD is more for putting like 2x4s together. So it drills a much larger hole, and you're using a thicker screw for maximum strength, if you will, and also so that it doesn't break off. Now, with everything set up for the 3/4, let's plug this puppy in and see what she's gonna do. Now that was real time. We've got all those holes drilled. Amazing. Now this concludes the setup of the Forman. And if you'd like to see us actually building cabinetry, making parts and pieces using the pocket holes, we will have that available in following chapters. Now, last piece of equipment that I'm going to share with you is my go-to. Now, this is actually a DK 100 TP. So, about 6-7 years ago, I went to an Amish auction, and I was there to look at a wide belt sander, and it went way out of sight. But anyways, this company was changing from making cabinetry to doing pole barns. So they were selling out their equipment. And I seen this Kreg machine sitting there at the auction, and I was familiar with my classic K4. Sorry, the classic thing had just a little side joke. Anyway, I was familiar with the Kreg name and my K4 pocket hole that I used by hand. So it interested me, and it went up for auction. And I got a little scared because it hit $400, it hit $450, it hit $500. And finally, I bid $600 on it. And I thought, man, I said, that's a whole lot of money. I hope this thing's worth it. Let me tell you, this thing is worth it. If you are a commercial fabricator, you're looking for speed, you're looking for reliability. Now, you can imagine this coming from an Amish place. This thing has probably seen hundreds of thousands of holes in its time. And I know I've drilled at least 100,000 with it, and it still works fantastic. Now, this is a fully pneumatic machine. The air cylinder in the area down below is, again, all air operated. This does have a foot pedal that you press. Drill bit comes up out of the table and makes the pocket hole for you. Now, if something like this interests you, look at their commercial line of equipment. This is available naturally in a newer model. This is way outdated. But you can expect to start spending at about $4,500 for the commercial line of equipment. But as I mentioned, if you're looking for something that's over the top in regards to quality, that's going to last you the rest of your life, this is the type of machine you want to get your hands on. They will offer this in a benchtop model like I have here. You can also get it full freestanding with a cabinet base. They have them with like 5-6 drill bits as well, naturally going up in cost as they do. But one thing I can say about the Kreg company, anytime I ever bought a piece of Kreg equipment, I have been absolutely, totally satisfied with the quality of product and durability. I would highly recommend any of their products to you. But like I said, if you're a commercial guy, you might want to look at something like this. Now, in all of the Kreg setup videos, I promised that in one of the later chapters, we would be covering actually constructing cabinets using the Kreg system. So what I'd like to do first is to talk a little bit about the tools that Kreg offers that'll make your life a whole lot easier in actually constructing cabinets. Now, this particular clamp right here, I've had for probably 15 years. Now, you could go to Harbor Freight and pick up something like this, relatively inexpensive, but you see what it has? The heads on it are very, very small. So that does not work great making frames for cabinets. This one I've had for about 15 years. You notice that the bottom is about the size of a 50-cent piece. The top one's a little bigger than a quarter. But basically what you do is that you line up your face frame and clamp it into place. And now you're ready to drill your pocket hole screw right into place. Now, as you can see, what this is doing is holding that nice and flush on the bottom and nice and flush on the top, but at the same time, it's not covering up your pocket hole, so it's not in your way. Kreg has taken this one step better. And what they've done is they offer now what's referred to as a Auto Max. What an Auto Max does is that you take your piece, clamp it right down, and there you go. Now, there's no adjustment on here. You can do a little adjustment if you want to fine tune it a little bit, a little more pressure, a little less pressure, but you can go from 3/4 inch material right to 1/2 inch thick material and not have to make any adjustments. So, nice little feature that they came up with there. Now, in making face frames, you can use a quick clamp, and you can clamp just product, but you can see it's not as nice as what the pads are on the Kreg clamp. But you can use it, and basically you can actually clamp the piece down by itself, or you can clamp it down right to the table. Now, the one thing I don't like about clamping something to the table, this is my build table. I glue everything. The glue naturally is your strength, not your screws, not your nails, not your staples. I glue everything. There's going to be specks of glue on here, so when I clamp to a table, I'm not getting a clean clamp. I like to actually just clamp my two pieces together. Now, another clamp that Kreg offers is one here where this is actually going right down inside of a pocket hole. And you can see that fits very nicely inside of a pocket hole. And we'll show you actually using this whenever we are doing like cabinet sides and things like that. Now, another tool that Kreg has come up with is this handy 90-degree angle tool. And what I'm talking about is whenever you get ready to start assembling your cabinet boxes together, this holds everything perfectly at a 90-degree angle. So now you're ready to run your pocket hole screws. To assemble cabinets together, you need a 6-inch long #2 square bit driver available from Kreg. Now, you'll see me doing a lot of videos where I'm actually using an impact. Now, an impact is actually the wrong thing to be using, but keeping in mind, I've been doing this for decades. So I'm bumping the trigger and I'm taking it down to get snug. But with an impact driver, you have this instinct to just take it full bore all the way in. What will happen if you use an impact and you're taking it full bore all the way in, especially with plywoods? You've taken the time to go ahead and finish your piece. You've got it all painted. You're ready to go, or naturally stained and finished. And what do? You end up running a screw through the finished side. So this can be a little too powerful. What you want to do instead of using an impact is just to use a drill. And what you want to do is you don't want to leave it on drilling. You want to adjust the clutch. Now, the clutch on a drill is made so that once it reaches a certain torque, the clutch will start slipping. So this allows you to take your screw down. Whenever it comes to the point where it's drawn tightly together, it's going to stop turning. So that's a nice feature to keep you from damaging product. Now, you're going to reach a time where you're, say for instance, building a column. And now you have your pocket holes in there, you're all ready to go, and you're like, oh man, now what? My drill's not going to fit in there, especially with the 6-inch long bit. Well, Kreg has thought of that as well. Basically what they've came up with is that we have a screw gun bit that just very comfortably goes down inside of the pocket hole. And then it has a right angle, so you attach your drill to this, again set with the clutch, and you're able to get in here and do tight work with that 90-degree device. Now there may be times where you have a permanent intermediate shelf, say for instance in a utility cabinet. The corner clamp will also work for intermediate work as well. Ready to screw your pocket holes. In regards to different types of construction, I already have several videos on how to build cabinetry on my channel. One is called How to Build a Huge Island on Casters. I have another one called Building Frameless Cabinets, and another one Making Cabinetry with Kreg Pockholes. So in regards to construction, I'm going to talk about two different types of construction. There's first of all the American frame cabinet. Now, frame cabinet has a face frame on it, and it's the way cabinets have been built in America for a long time. And then over in Europe, you're going to find cabinets which are referred to as frameless. Now, I will refer to them as European frameless only because they became very popular over in Europe first. Now, the strange thing about cabinetry over in Europe is that when a person moves, they actually take their cabinets with them. What they have is a metal hanging strip up on the wall. The wall cabinets hang on that metal hanging strip and tighten up, and they're able to be leveled up. The base cabinets aren't attached to the wall. They have little leveler legs on. They're just setting into place. They take the leveler legs and level them up and set their countertop on top of them. How neat of an idea, huh? Now, with the American frame cabinet, they're typically going to have either 1/2-inch particle board sides or 1/2-inch plywood sides. Now, when it comes to plywood, there's really not much difference between the 1/2-inch and 3/4. All you're really looking at is they're putting more cores in between the two. And the cores are normally sort of a garbage wood, so it's not that much more expensive to go from 1/2-inch to 3/4. Just pointing that out, you might want to go to 3/4 construction on your next cabinet build. Anyways, the European style of cabinet is made out of industrial board. Now, industrial board is similar to particle board, but it's your best grade of particle board. The difference is the composition. Now, the composition of this is a much smaller flake, and it has an oil-based glue. So it's not like normal plywood. If it gets wet, it's just not going to absorb it like a sponge and fall apart. Now, the product I'm using has a melamine on the exterior of it. This will be available with either melamine or a vinyl. I'm not crazy about the vinyl. The vinyl is a little easier to rip and tear. The melamine basically is the top color sheet of a piece of Formica, so very tough, durable surface. Now, this type of construction is what you're normally going to find in hospitals and doctors' offices. The reason being is that wood is porous. Wood will actually harbor bacteria, versus the melamine won't. And actually, you'll normally find a high-pressure laminate exterior. I'll refer to that loosely as Formica. Formica is a trade name, but people understand what I'm talking about. You typically won't find plywood in a European style of construction. The reason being is plywood has a tendency to warp a little bit. So even in 3/4-inch material, you can have some warpage going on. Versus the industrial board naturally is very, very stable. Now, in regards to building a wood cabinet, basically, in regards to the plywood, you're going to have a lot of different wood species available to you. Most popular is going to be maple, cherry, hickory, oak, and you can also get them with like maple on one side and oak on the other. Now, the one thing that I found is that the interior cabinets, customers really don't pay a whole lot of attention to. So let's just say, for instance, that you have a cherry cabinet that you're doing, and it has, say for instance, a cordovan finish on the side. How you like that? Cordovan. Anyways, one of my favorite colors actually. But anyways, you could actually use cherry on both sides. Naturally, you would finish the interior of it clear, and then the exterior of it, you would stain it with the cordovan stain and clear coat it over top of that. So what are some of the advantages of using the Kreg Pockholes system versus some traditional joinery? Well, let's take a look at the European first. Now, European in the old days, what we did was we put it together, we shot some staples in it, and then we used some assembly screws and screwed it together. And then we covered the exterior of it in HPL, high pressure laminate, or Formica. But anyways, it didn't matter about the fasteners because we were covering it with either a laminate or we were covering it with a wood veneer, depending upon what the customer was using for the face of the cabinet. But let's just say, for instance, you say, well, Dawn, I sort of like the white melamine material, you know, I'd like to use that in my closet. Well, why not? I mean, realistically, in a closet, it's going to be very, very durable as far as clothing and stuff like that. It's going to last a lifetime. So if you were to do that, well, Dawn, now, what do I do in regards to hiding all the fasteners? Well, that's the one nice thing about the Kreg Pockholes system. What you do is, let's just say, for instance, that this is your side of your cabinet and this is your top of your cabinet. So what do? You drill pocket holes in the top of the cabinet and you screw it together. Now, you don't see any fasteners on the inside. On the bottom of the cabinet, you do the same thing. Now, you're probably going to have a toe kick, so you'd start 4 inches up off the floor. And again, you do the pocket holes and screw it right in. Now, if you're talking about a tall storage cabinet, the problem with a tall storage cabinet is that the cabinet might start to expand out. The back's going to hold that, but keeping in mind that at a certain point, if they put a lot of weight on, you can get some expansion out on the side. So what do? First of all, you hit it about waist high and you put an intermediate in. Now the intermediate has the pocket holes on the bottom of it, and you're going to screw that into the side. Now, this is only 3 feet off the floor, so you really don't even see it that much. So concealment is one of the big advantages of using Kreg Pockholes joinery. You don't see the fasteners. If you're going to glue everything together, the Kreg Pockholes screws are going to hold things together while the glue's setting up. The difference between the European cabinet and the frame cabinet is the European style of construction, you're going to hold the top and the bottom of, say, a wall cabinet even with the top and bottom. And then with the frame cabinet, because you're putting a frame around it, you're going to hold the bottom up so that you have maybe a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch reveal from the inside. And also the same thing on the top. So the first thing that you're going to do is that you're going to take your top and bottom piece. And normally what I do on plywood is I come 1 inch in, and then I drill one in the middle and another one. So every 6 inches. So on a wall cabinet would be 3 screws. On a base cabinet would be 4. But you're going to pocket hole drill the top of your cabinet, and now you're going to screw that to your side of your cabinet. And using the pocket hole screws, they're not going to be seen. On the bottom of the cabinet, they will be seen if somebody gets up and looks up, or say, for instance, they're sitting at a table, they're looking underneath. My experience is people don't pay attention to the bottom of a wall cabinet. Most manufacturers don't even finish the bottom of their wall cabinet. So, like I said, it's not a high visibility area, and it's recessed up in approximately about 1 inch or so. So, very easy to take one of your plugs and put them in those holes, so you really don't even see them. Now for your face frame, again, what I do if it's not an exposed side is that I will take my side of my cabinet and drill it from the outside. Again, that is concealing because once 2 cabinets are together, this side's not being seen. Now, if in fact I do have a finished side, what I'll do is naturally we've already anchored the top and bottom. So a standard wall cabinet's only 30 inches high. So I do one pocket hole right in the middle. Now, I glue everything, as I already mentioned. So I'm going to glue this, place my face frame on top of it. You could just put a clamp on if you wanted to. But I do one pocket hole on the inside of that, and then I'll cover it up with one of these plastic plugs. Now, the only difference I do in drilling between the European frameless and the plywood is I will start about 2 inches in. Just keeps me from doing any blowout. Now, we covered the cabinet boxes, but what about the drawers for the cabinet? You might be thinking, how am I going to do that? And a lot of people are going to say, oh, there's nothing better than solid wood dovetail drawer boxes. And they're absolutely right, but they're going to be, number one, very time consuming. Now, if you want to go that route, there are a lot of companies out there selling solid wood dovetail drawer boxes. But in your little shop, what do you do about your drawers if you want to make them yourself? Well, first of all, I worked at a company, and the way that they would build a drawer box is naturally the side of the drawer box goes past your front and back, and then they would take an 18-gauge nailer and actually shoot 4 to 5 18-gauge nails up through there. Now, this was before the invention of cushion closed drawer track. And about once a week, I would have a male customer come in that had gotten mad at his wife and slammed the drawer, and he's holding the drawer head and drawer box that came apart and wants it to be repaired. So, not a very strong joint. So, how can you do it with the pocket holes? Well, keep in mind that your sides of your drawer boxes are going to go from front to back. So, that's the part that everybody's going to see. The front is going to be covered by a drawer head, and the back naturally is on the inside of the cabinet. Nobody sees it unless they take the drawer completely out. So, for a very strong joint, what you do is use pocket holes. How convenient, right? Anyways, you're normally going to have a groove in the bottom of your drawer for your 1/4 inch bottom, but set your pocket hole right above that groove, and you can get 2 nice pocket holes. You could even do 3. As the drawer boxes become higher, you add more and more screws to the drawer box. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a screw that's about 1/8 of an inch thick. 2 of those. Let's see somebody break that off, especially if you're going to use the new cushion closed drawer track on the drawers. But a nice, strong joint. Let's talk for a minute about what is the strongest way to do the pocket holes. Now, anytime that you can come from the top and screw into a side, so in other words, we're talking this type of application, our screw is going into the meat of the product. So that's going to be a nice, strong joint. If you have to do it this direction, you can, but keeping in mind that you're going towards the edge of the product. So that's not going to be quite as strong as what it will be the other direction. Now, you got everything cut out and what have you, and I will refer to screwing the pocket hole into place as drifting, if you will. And what I'm talking about is, if you get really good at setting these up, you know that the drift's going to be a little about 1/16 of an inch, maybe a little heavier than a 1/16. So you can actually cheat the piece up thinking that you're going to pull it down to a finished dimension where it's going to be flush. A little risque. The new Kreg corner clamp is naturally your best bet. But if you don't have one of those, naturally, you can do a bar clamp. Now, whenever you clamp a pocket hole and you screw it, it doesn't move on you, so you don't have to worry about that drift. Another option that you could look at doing as well is if you do have the Kreg piece, which I said I was going to explain later to you, you can do 2 pocket holes. So you can put this piece in the one pocket hole, clamp it to this piece, and use the other pocket hole in order to screw it. Again, you're clamped, so it's not going to drift on you. Now, what I tried to do here was to give a very hurried explanation of pocket hole joinery and constructing cabinets. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull some snippets from some of my videos that I've already done which will become naturally a lot more lengthy. But those of you that got lost in the dust, you may want to continue watching that to get more information, or you can naturally go to my channel and watch these videos in full length. But I'm going to pull a few snippets. One of them is going to be from that huge island on casters. I had over 100 Kreg screws in this, and you could only actually find 2 screws whenever I was finished with the project. Turned out really, really nice, but that will give you a very good explanation of pocket hole joinery. Now, this cabinet is going to actually be a combination of the European / frame cabinet, because it will go to 3/4 construction using plywood and doing a face frame on it. But I was going for maximum strength with this cabinet, so you'll understand it more whenever you see the videos. We're ready to start the assembly of our frame. Now, terminology is, it's referred to as stiles and rails. Stiles are your uprights and your rails are running horizontal. Typically stiles and rails, 1.5 inches is what I normally do. However, because I'm adding the brackets to the rear side, I went with wider stiles and rails. I normally do 2 pocket holes in a joint with the glue. Again, keeping in mind, any good cabinet maker will tell you it's not the screws, it's not the nails that holds the joint together, it is the glue. So we'll be using a normal water-based Elmer's glue for the joint, and you'll notice that I'm wiping the excess glue off. Now, I've taken the time to sand my frame before I assemble it, so naturally I can do all my edges and what have you. But 2 things. Whenever we wipe off the glue, we're doing that because if we're staining product, stain is not going to stick to glue. The second thing is that the wet rag is going to raise the grain. So here's the problem. If you go to stain, that raised area is going to take more stain than the other areas that's been sanded. So after you assemble your frame, you want to go over your joints again one more time with the sander, and that'll smooth out that raised grain. Now I'm going to be assembling this cabinet together with, again, the Kreg pocket screws. We're going to conceal them in 90% of the locations. So first of all, I've got my top and my bottom, and I'm going to drill about every 6 inches along here for a Kreg pocket screw. I'm going to go here so that it screws into my front frame. I'm going to go left and right so that it screws into my sides. And then I'm also, because I'm putting a plant on back, I'm also going to drill along here for my back. Now, I'll be doing 2 more pocket holes in 2 more sides. And what I'm talking about is, for my face frame, it'll be anchored on the top and bottom by my top and bottom. But on my cabinet sides, I'll go on the inside of my cabinet and I'll drill a couple of holes there. We'll be inserting the Kreg pocket hole screws there, and then there's a couple of little plastic caps that cover up those screws. How am I going to get this thing off the table? Forklift? I've just attached the face frame. Now, this cabinet has probably in the neighborhood of around 100 Kreg screws in it. Overkill? Yeah. If it were a cabinet being screwed to the wall, definite overkill. But again, this is going to be on caster, it's going to be moved around. So I did the very best that I can. How did it turn out? It's the tip channel. That is perfection. Anyways, Now that we're finished, whenever this thing is installed, you are only going to be able to find 4 pocket screws. Now what I have is I have 2 in behind the frame on the inside here and on that side. Everything else is totally concealed. These we will cover with a nice little plastic cap. And those will slide right over top of the hole, just like that. I'm standing here today with a very good friend of mine, Mario. Now, Mario has MD Piccolomini cabinetry. That's a mouthful, right? He's the MD of cabinetry. I just made that part up. Anyways, Mario and I have been friends and business associates for over 40 years. Now, Mario, what year did you actually start building cabinets?
Well, actually, I started building cabinets in 1970. The story was that my dad and my uncle decided to open up a restaurant supply store in Uniontown next to our family restaurant. And my dad had a table saw in the basement of this apartment building that my uncle owned. And so they needed some shelves and some counters to do some display work to display their products. So I ended up, I said, hey, I can do that. And at the time I was 13 years old.
Well, let me ask you, Mario. I mean, in your shop here, you've built a lot of cabinets. Over the years, how many cabinets do you think you've actually built?
Don, I'll tell you, I'm sure that it's been thousands at this particular point.
Probably more like hundreds of thousands.
Probably hundreds of thousands, I'm sure. I mean, we had a beautiful system here. You know, had one particular point had seven men working here, and you know, we just had a nice system. I had a saw man, and he would get on a saw early in the morning and turn it on. It shut down about 11:45, and 12:45 the saw would go back on up until quitting time. He actually wore a fishing hat, and he had like 1.5 inches of sawdust on his hat all the time, because at that particular time in the early years we didn't even have a dust collection system in here.
Huh. I've been busting Mario's chops now for years to try out the Kreg Pockholes system. And a little while ago, I came into Mario's shop, and what do I see on his workbench? The Kreg 720 Pro. Best of the best right now in regards to the hand jig with the Kreg. So, Mario, what made you finally give in, and what did you think of product?
Well, Don, I have to tell you, you came over here one day to do a little demonstration of the Kreg tool, and I was thoroughly impressed with it. And so were the guys that were here working that specific day. So I decided eventually one of these days I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to purchase one of these. I decided to give this Kreg tool an opportunity to prove itself to me. I had a little bit of a complicated build that I needed to do, and I thought, you know what, I have some time. I'm not in a rush to get this done, so I thought it would be beneficial to go ahead and give it a shot. So I went ahead and did that. You know, it took me a little bit of time to figure it out, but I have to tell you, after you get the initial setup done, the ease of using the piece of equipment and the amount of time that it takes to do it once you know what you're doing is like 1/3 of the time that it would take to do something normal, whether it be a biscuit joint or a dowel joint or something like that. And the joint is amazing. It is tight. There's no chance of you blowing through the face of the product or doing any damage. And if you need to redo it or add another screw or something like that, it's very easy to do that. And setup is very simple once you learn the process of using the piece of equipment.
Fantastic. Nice job.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it.
Good.
Oh, we're still running?
We're still taping.
Yeah, we're still taping.
He's the MD of cabinetry. I just made that part up. Now, this is going to conclude our video in regards to pocket hole joinery. I hope that this is going to help a lot of you. Now, they say that if you steal something from one person, you're a thief. But if you take it from many, it's called doing research. And if you think that you've seen some of this information somewhere else, you probably have. I did a ton of research. I can tell you that the Kreg channel has a lot of information, and there's a lot of good people on YouTube explaining product as well. So you don't have to take just me, but I'm hoping I'm giving you enough information that you can get started. You're going to learn so much more as you go on with the pocket hole joinery. If you'd like to add some tips and tricks of your own, please do so in the comment. Love to hear from people out there. I do hope that you liked the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Thank you much for watching, and have a great day.